Mind science means that it's kind of it's a translation of the Indian word 𝗪𝗲𝗪 or 𝗪𝗲𝗪𝗀𝗀 in Tibetan, which means science of the interior of the being. And inner science would be a synonym. And it sort of plays off the Western idea that science has to be materialistic and deal with everything as if it were an external object, even the brain. Even psychology wants to reduce the mind to something that's external, can be observed as an external object, and evidence corroborated, this sort of thing. Whereas in India, the king or queen of the sciences from the beginning was this inner science, because they decided that the way in which you either master or are mastered by your mind will be what will determine the quality of your experience in life as the primary element. I mean, not that if you're run over by a truck, it won't determine the quality of your life, but it's your reaction to being run over by the truck that is more important, actually, in the longer run, at least from their view. Because even if you're run over by a truck fatally, then of course your mind is released from your body and you're in the matrix between death and rebirth, and then it's only the quality of your mind that determines how you go. But while you're in life and still harnessed within a physical sensory system of brain and body, then of course it's still the inner reactions to everything that happens to you that's most important. And we all know that. We know how we can be miserable in the midst of a very wonderful situation, and how we can be quite cheerful in the midst of difficulties and adversities. And that's because we're reacting differently. And the Western idea was that science is only there for dealing with the external things in the world, and even inner things are tried to be made to be external things to be dealt with. And therefore dealing with the inner is just like some faith in something or having a belief in something, and sort of the opposite of scientific. The only access to meaning that you have in the Western culture that I knew then was either blind faith in some sort of divine providence, which did not appeal to me. Blind faith did not. Or an acceptance of the idea that there is no meaning. It's just random mutation of a materialist entity that thinks it's a human being. And neither of them were satisfying to me. And the Buddha discovered reality, and that was his Buddhahood, his enlightenment. And he discovered that reality itself is freedom, and the experience of that freedom is bliss. That's why he was smiling, the Buddha was. Buddha is not the real refuge, nor is the Sangha, the community. He's just the teacher, the community, or the compatriots, or the fellow practitioners. But the real refuge is the Dharma, which means reality itself. So you're taking refuge in your essential freedom. And so then that means that I feel like being angry, or I feel like being depressed, or I feel like being egotistical, but I'm free not to be, actually. Then that's taking refuge in the Dharma, really. I say Buddhism is engaged realism, basically, because Buddha's discovery was that reality is good, it is blissful, it is free, freedom. And therefore, the more we know of it, the more free and more happy we are. And the more ignorant we are, the more we suffer. So that's why I like the Buddhism is realism. So therefore, the Buddhist inner science and the Buddhist teaching about death and impermanence is simply helping us to be more realistic under the guise and under the Buddha's assurance that the more we know of our own reality, the better off we will be. His Holiness is, first of all, a happy person, because he is aware of reality. He is definitely enlightened. I mean, I am not able to judge to what extent, but definitely more enlightened than the ordinary person, which means therefore more realistic than the ordinary person. Doesn't mean somehow he has a mystic light in his head, or that he goes and he becomes mysteriously mystical in the midst of horror. He can be happy because he's disconnected. The contrary, because he's connected, he realizes that beneath the horror, within it, there's this potential of freedom always, that things can change.